Hello and welcome to this video explainer for DISC. We'll be looking at the model itself and the significance that it can have for ourselves and the people around us. One thing which is really important here is that the more we understand people around us, the better we end up understanding ourselves as well. So bear this in mind as we go through this video together. Just before we look at the details of the DISC model and how it works and how it can be useful for you in your professional or in your personal life, there are a few things that we need to consider as you watch this video. So DISC is a tool which is widely used among many organizations, and it helps us to helps us to understand why we tend to behave as we do in certain situations. Four things to consider. First of all, as a model, it's validated by scientific research across many cultures. In fact, DISC is used all over the world. When you receive your report after having done the test, what you need to bear in mind is that report is a photograph. It takes a photograph of you. It's not a video. Our behaviors do vary according to the context in which we find ourselves in. What your report shows is your general tendencies. Another thing which is important, all of us have all four of the DISC factors. It's just that we tend to express some more than others, but all four are there. And finally, it's perfectly natural that as you listen to the description of the different factors, you will start to think about people that you know. Okay, that's perfectly normal. It's very helpful. What we need to bear in mind is, though, that it's very rare to find somebody who's like a pure dominant factor or a pure stability factor. Okay, so bearing in mind those little points there, let's take a look at the model itself. So, not surprisingly, DISC is a circle. The circle has been divided into four different factors. Each of these factors has a set of behaviors that we would associate with them. So the four factors are, first of all, dominance, influence, stability, and compliance. Later on, we'll take a deep dive on each of these factors. Just a little side note here. Stability and compliance, there are alternative names for these two different factors, which you will sometimes see in the literature, things if you're doing internet searches, etc. What's important is that it's always an S and always a C. The actual characteristics of these factors stay the same regardless of the different names. So if we now consider the top half of the DISC, okay, which is dominance and influence, these two factors are action-oriented. They want to see things happen, they feel that the world could be better in some way, and they'll do what they need to do to push and to get some sort of change. The bottom half, compliance and stability, are more thought-oriented. Okay, they're not in such a rush to push ahead with those changes. They want to think things through. They want to make sure that if we're going to do something different, that it will actually work. Then if we consider the right-hand side of the DISC, that's the influence and the stability factors, both of these factors are people-oriented. What's important for them when they're working together is who they're doing it with. Okay, that's a major concern for them. They want to know who's on the team, and they certainly don't want to work alone. Whereas on the left-hand side, we've got the dominance and the compliance, and both of these are factors which are task-oriented. So it's probably more important to them what they're doing rather than who they're doing it with. Okay, now this is just a very brief overview of the four factors from the DISC model. If we have somebody who's got, let's say, a high D factor and a high I factor, so that's dominance and influence, okay, they're going to be very action-oriented people. If we're looking at somebody who has essentially the most prominent factor that they have is influence, they're going to be somebody who tends to work with enthusiasm, is always there, very optimistic. If we've got somebody who's got a good balance between the influence and stability factors, they are going to be people who look always for collaboration and who are able to generate collaboration. Whereas somebody who is essentially a high S, a high stability, they'll be looking more, we'll probably find somebody who's there to support us, who's there and wants to support us. People who've got a high C and a high S factor, they'll be very, very, very consistent. They'll be very, very steady, very, very reassuring for us. Somebody who's got mainly a high C factor, then we're going to have somebody who's very, very careful, very, very precise. Okay. And finally, or the penultimate combination, somebody with a high D and a high C, they're going to love to work for a challenge there because they've got the drive and they've got the accuracy which is necessary. Finally, somebody with a high D factor is going to be results oriented. That's what's going to be their focus. Now, let's take a deep dive on each of the 4 factors. So, the D factor, what's the D factor known for? What's their reputation? Somebody with a high D factor will be known for getting things done under pressure at whatever cost. Let's take a look now at the positives of the D factor. Okay, as we said earlier on, they're very much results oriented. You know, sort of if they know what the objective is, they'll put their head down and they will do their damnedest to make sure that we get the results. Also very decisive. They've got no real problems making decisions. Sometimes those decisions may be even snap decisions. This is because they feel that there's always a way of being able to get the job done. So that's why they're not scared to make a decision. Also, they're not scared of hurdles. They're not scared of obstacles in the way because they know that they'll be able to find a way around them or over them. And finally, rapid. Because they're action oriented, because they want to get the results, they tend to want to get them as quickly as possible. Otherwise, they'll end up getting bored. So you'll find that, you know, generally speaking, once they've got something in their sights, then they'll do their best to get there as quickly as possible. However, as with all of the 4 factors, we need to pay attention to a number of points. With the D's, this is, okay, a tendency to be impatient, wanting to get things done as quickly as possible. And notice here that this affects, in particular, people who may want to take things at a bit of a slower pace. Also, a high D may be a little bit superficial, might not look at things in enough detail, and this can bring, you know, sort of create problems for them. Also, I suppose in a way it's related to their impatience, but they really don't understand other people's fears, and that makes them, you know, sort of not particularly empathetic. Plus, the desire to get things done quickly will mean that, you know, they won't want to invest time in explaining things to other people. Just want people to understand and get on with things straight away, and that's not always possible. So now, as we will do for each of the 4 factors, let's take a look at the way in which they tend to interact with other people. They like to come in with authority, and you know, if something's not moving, they'll do something to get things moving. They'll listen to understand only what it is that they need to be successful. Pretty good at taking feedback as long as it's direct, clear, and related to the results. Not the best of delegators. They'll only do it when necessary and when they trust the delegee, and their instructions may well tend to be a little bit telegraphic. Not scared of conflicts, which for them is not a problem, but for others it can be, because they will often resolve these conflicts in a very explosive manner. Communication tends to be very direct, very sincere, few words, and they will often challenge others as well with their communication. In terms of giving feedback, it may well be for many people a little bit too direct, and it probably won't take into consideration other people's feelings either. Team player, well, not so much. As part of a team, they'd like to have some kind of authority. So, if they don't have a role which gives them that authority, then they'll probably withdraw from the team. They're motivated by personal challenges and the chance of some form of power as well. Finally, their biggest fear is that of failing. So, let's move on now to our influence factor. Now, the influence factor, their reputation, fantastic. Working with and via others to create visions. That's what they're known for. In terms of the positives that we have for this factor, they're fantastic networkers. They bring together and encourage teams to go beyond their limits. They're very, very good at persuading people that they can do things. Very positive thinkers, very optimistic as well, and as well as having positive attitudes, they will also help to keep others around them optimistic as well. Also, as we said a bit earlier on, they're persuasive, they can be very convincing, and that's because they're good at finding those motivational buttons, be it with the team, a client, or a supplier. They will help make sure that the people around them feel motivated. And finally, as well, they often tend to be very, very creative. A lot of ideas. They don't just go for the quick solution. They often look around and try to bring things together, and often bringing in other people as well to consult. Again, we may run into a few problems with people with a high I factor. It's perfectly normal. Okay. Tendency to be a little bit disorganized because they maybe try to do too much at once, and this creates a bit of confusion. As well, direction may not always be clear because they find it difficult to prioritize. Everything's important to them. They've got a lot of people involved, a lot of people are invested in their ideas, but what's going to take priority? Also, this optimism may lead to them over-delegating, so giving tasks to people who are not able to do them or not able to follow them through. And finally, time management as well, because it's difficult for them to prioritize. Setting deadlines with somebody with a high I can be a little bit tough at times. So again, our summary of the I factor. Okay, they will interact with other people through involving them. And they'll be listening out for things that intrigue them, that stimulate them in some way. Feedback is okay as long as it's packaged nicely. We don't want too direct a feedback to a high I factor. As we said, they're great at delegating, or we just need to be careful that they don't over-delegate, but what they're really good at is matching skills and attitudes and desires to tasks. Also, in terms of conflict, they will tend to try to lower the tone when there's a conflict going on, and maybe even try to convince you that there isn't really a conflict, or that it's not really worth having a conflict. Communication will be very involving. They'll be talking about what we do and what we could do. They'll also be quite impulsive and emotional as well with their communication. In terms of giving feedback, it will be done in a very encouraging manner, thinking very much about the person who is receiving that feedback. As part of a team, they'll want to be center stage, but are very happy to involve others and to show appreciation of others as well. In terms of motivation, anything that's kind of prestigious or has some kind of innovation there, or something which gives them attention, that'll motivate them. The biggest fear they have is that of being left out. They want to be there on the stage with you. So, thinking now about our stability factor, what's their reputation? Well, they're always there to help you get things done and in harmony as well. So, what are the positives of somebody with a high stability factor? Well, first of all, very dependable. Once they've understood what task needs to be completed, they will do their utmost to make sure that it gets done. Great team players, and it's a very sort of self-organizing team. They like to work in a harmonious way, and they'll do everything that they can to create a positive environment around the team. Also, as well as being dependable, they will tend to be proactive. They will look for things. They'll be looking for ways of helping you as well. And excellent listeners. Now, they'll listen with empathy, but also to understand how they can be of help. And in a work environment, they'll be listening for things which are related to both professional and personal. So where do we need to be a little bit careful with a high S factor? Um, Changes are not the best thing. Changes to the ways of working, etc. That can upset their literally their stability, and it'll take them a little bit of time to get used to changes. Focus, their desire to help may end up causing them to not understand where their priorities might lie because they've got quite a lot on their plates. And related to that as well, we need to be really, really careful not to overload somebody with a high S factor because they'll tend not to show stress because they'll always be looking for ways of helping you. The problem is that if they get overloaded at a certain point, they will just implode. And it is difficult to see the signs. So this is an important point here. And finally, although they're great team players, they don't necessarily want to be in the spotlight. So they love being behind the scenes. They love giving the support which is necessary, but they might not respond well if they're put center stage. So let's take a look at our 10 points for the high S factor. Interaction, yeah, very open. They'll be very patient. They won't necessarily be extremely extrovert, but they will talk about their experiences. As we said earlier, great listeners, and they'll listen to both work aspects and personal aspects because they want to understand how they can support you. The feedback, if it's given in a caring way, if it's given in an empathetic way, they'll be fine to that. Direct communication might not work so well. Delegation is interesting because it tends to be very much a splitting up of tasks. And one thing that's for sure, they will always be available if you ever need any clarification on a task that they delegated. We need to be honest here. Conflicts are not something that people with a high S factor enjoy, and they will try to avoid them. Remember, they want to keep that harmonious working environment. Communication will be done in a calm, friendly way, again, bringing in their own experiences. In terms of giving feedback, they'll do this in a very gentle, a very empathetic way, and make sure that the person receiving the feedback does feel at ease. In terms of a team, as we've already said, they want to create harmony and make sure that everybody's happy and that they feel supported as well. Motivation is that of being able to help others and having things in order. As we saw, sort of we don't want too many changes. So having familiar things, familiar processes around us make us feel at ease. Biggest fear, probably that of rapid changes or uncertain contexts. And we come along to our final factor, compliance. What's their reputation? Well, they're known for making sure that things actually do what it says on the tin. So not just empty promises, but making sure that things really, really do work. In terms of the positives for the compliance factor, precision. Okay, if you've handed over tasks, things will be thought through. Okay, and the results that you get will be of a high standard. They'll also be very thorough. So when analyzing things, they'll think of as many scenarios as possible before presenting suggestions and solutions. Also, most of what they do will be very, very data based. Okay, it will be based on facts. It will be based on a logical approach, not so much an emotive approach. And finally, because of the way of thinking, excellent at creating strategy and excellent at planning things out as well. Well, as with all the factors, we need to be careful. Time, because of their desire for precision, their desire for thoroughness, that can consume perhaps more times than available. Also, they may be guilty of overwork, so producing things which are of a higher standard than is actually necessary. Also, maybe a little bit inflexible because they like to follow procedures, and they may well be a little bit resistant to trying to skip around things and trying to cut corners. And finally, in terms of teamwork, happy to be in a team, but at times they may come across a little bit cold because of this very logical approach. Our 10 points for the compliance factor. When they interact with other people, they want to interact concerning their areas of specialist knowledge. That's where they feel most comfortable. They will listen for the technical things. They will listen for insights as well. In terms of feedback, as long as it's factual and doesn't question their level of professionalism and is fact-based, they'll be fine. In terms of delegate, they will delegate when they trust a colleague or when a colleague has complementary skills, but they like to have a little final check themselves. Conflict is a little bit tough because we sort of leave the logical realm and we move into a more emotive realm. So they may sort of deal with conflict by withdrawing. Communication is quite funny because many times within a group situation they won't be communicating necessarily that much, except for when we're dealing with their areas of specialization, and then they will talk quite a lot. In terms of giving feedback, it will probably be done with a lot of details, a lot of facts, but not necessarily taking into account as much as they might the human factors. In terms of team, as said, that's okay, as long as the teamwork doesn't disrupt their task too much. Motivated by a structured environment, clear instructions, and the possibility of expressing their talents. Biggest fear, it's a little bit strange maybe, it's embarrassment. They want to be seen as the professional, as somebody who gets things right. So when things are maybe not as precise as they like, that's where they can maybe meet their biggest fear. So just a few thoughts to conclude. I think it's interesting, sort of the use of DISC. It gives us a different viewpoint. This is particularly important when we've maybe been working with a group of people for a long time, and we've got some situations that we've never really been able to fathom. By applying DISC, it can often help us to get a shift in behavior. DISC is it's a tool, and what I think you'll find is it reduces the trial and error that there may be when we're trying to work out, sort of why somebody's behaving in a certain way and what we should do about it. We also always need, though, to take into account our own behavior. So we need to be very, very honest with ourselves as well if we're going to use DISC successfully. Um, it's a great tool as well to help us observe those around us, and this can be, not just the people that we're working with, but the people we come into contact with every day. Somebody who works in a bar and has a certain attitude towards us. It can be really interesting and improve all our relationships. Just remember, there's nobody who's a pure D or a pure C or I or S. Okay, we all have that mix. And finally, don't forget to have a bit of fun with it as well, because sort of particularly if you've got a group of people who are all using Disk as well, it can be quite interesting, to sort of maybe be a little bit, add in a bit of irony and auto irony as well to things, and so like and say things like, hey, sorry, this is the D in me, I think we need to make a move here. So, what's next? Well, now that you've seen this video and you've got an idea of how this works, you're ready to sit down and read your report. Depending on the length of the report you've got, we recommend finding a quiet space for between 15 and 30 minutes to sit down and read through the report carefully. There's a lot of information in there. Um, Dedicate a bit of time to it. Dedicate a bit of time to it. Also, if your learning path foresees this, organize a debrief. The debrief with your DISC coach will help you to understand a bit better your profile, but also how your profile fits with your current situation. Then observe your team over the next few days or few weeks. If they were to do the DISC test, where do you think they would be? And finally, again, if the learning path that you're on foresees this, take part in a workshop or in a course which sort of helps you to understand even better how you can make the most of your new knowledge of DISC. Okay? For those of you who are interested, the QR code will take you to my LinkedIn profile. I'm Steve Williams, and it was a pleasure to introduce you to DISC. Bye.